Welcome to all Caribbean entrepreneurs. If you've been ready and waiting to take your business digital and get paid online while you sip something strong on the beach, this podcast is for you. We'll hear from the Caribbean's finest entrepreneurs on topics like e-commerce, business development, brand building, social media, their wins and failures. This is the only place in the region helping you navigate the digital age from the Caribbean's perspective. This is Digipreneur FM. And now, let's give it up for the Digiboss himself, Mr. Karan Rose.
Thank you to everybody tuning in to another episode of the Digipreneur FM podcast. And as usual, it is your boy, Mr. Rose. DJ, you gotta fade us all the way out because we gotta talk to the people. How are you wonderful people doing? How are you doing? So it is August 25th, 2022. And this is episode number 96. Episode number 96. We inch closer and closer to that milestone mark of episode 100. If this is your first time tuning into the Digipreneur FM podcast, I want to welcome you to the family. You know, we have a lot of fun on this side of the interwebs. We have a lot of, jewels dropping, Every podcast episode is essentially a masterclass in whatever the topic is that we are talking about. And, we focus primarily on helping Caribbean entrepreneurs or people in the diaspora, or maybe people outside of the entire Caribbean region. We help them to navigate the digital age from the Caribbean perspective, right? And the reason we do that is because every single country, every single region is unique. And even though we have, we all have the same or similar problems, we all have a different perspective, a different approach, because the rules, the laws, the regulations, the tools, the availability of the things that we have access to, they're all different. So because everything is different, we have to attack those problems in our own unique way. And I think one of the beautiful things about having this podcast, focused on, the Caribbean and, what's happening in our region, is many people thought that when you niche down, because they feel the Caribbean is so small, that when they niche down, they're not going to be able to get the traction that they want. And you know what? It's quite the opposite. What I tell people from day one is that, and I have this view because I come from Canada, right? And this is why I have this view. But in Canada, we know what the problems are in Canada. So what we would do is we would look to see how are other people in other countries solving similar problems. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have in the Caribbean is that, one, we don't always look to see, what's happening in the other parts of the world, how are they solving it, and, taking that information and then localizing the content or the solutions to our demographics, to our market, and make it work for us. And then when we do that, we only ever look at the U.S. And because, the U.S. is so far away from what's happening in the Caribbean, a lot of the solutions that we take wholesale from the U.S., they simply are not relevant at all for our market, right? You jump on YouTube, you watch an American person talk about e-commerce, and they're telling you things that work for their market. But if you were to do that in the Caribbean, you are going to end up in the world of problems. It's not going to work for you because what we have access to, the tools we have available to us, it's all different, right? And so when a lot of people, when people do decide to create content or create a solution, what happens as well is that they tend to try to make their content appealing to the U.S. because a lot of them just want to get recognition from the U.S. market and then, get a U.S. client or get a U.S. opportunity to migrate. So what happens is, like I said, so in Canada, we constantly look around the world to see who is having similar problems and how are they solving it, and we're able to take that information and then localize it for us in Canada. And then the reason why this podcast stands out and the reason why, I always say Caribbean, is that people are out there around the world looking to see how is the Caribbean solving these similar issues. But if you are not creating localized content and you're only creating content that appeases to the U.S. market, then you've lost your uniqueness. The U.S., they have all the experts that they need. They don't need any more, right? And then you don't live there. So you don't know the ins and outs of, why they do what they do. You don't know the fact that each state has their own nuances, right? Their own cultures, their own nuances. You're not there to see it and to create. So you're just creating, kind of blanket information, hoping that somebody in the U.S. kind of picks up on it, right? But when you create localized content for your market, then people around the world can identify you uniquely and say, oh, wow, that's what they're doing over in Jamaica. Cool. I love that. We can take some of that information and apply it to us. And they're going to want to talk to you based on the fact that, you're solving a problem in your country, right? So the reason why I always, shout out, I shout out all the countries that listen to the podcast, but the reason why, I also shout them out, and the reason why, if you follow me over on Instagram, why, every single month I always show the countries that are listening to the podcast is that I want you guys, seeing is believing, and I want you guys to understand that when people are tuning into your content, they want your content for the uniqueness. They're looking at you because of where you are. But when you focus on creating local content, you can get global reach based on your local content. So that's why I always show the amount of countries that are listening to the podcast. So when we look at our top 6 countries right now, it's August 25th, the top 6 countries that are downloading the Digipreneur FM podcast, number 1 is Trinidad and Tobago, number 2 is the U.S., number 3 is Panama, number 4 is Cyprus, folks. Number 5 is Argentina, and in the 6th place is Jamaica, right? And if we go down the line, let's go to the top 10. 6 is Jamaica, 7th is Canada, 8th is Barbados, 9th is Ireland, and then number 10 is the Cayman Islands, all right? We even have people downloading the podcast in the Ukraine. I'm like, don't they have bigger things happening over in the Ukraine? But guess what? We're getting downloads in the Ukraine. We're getting downloads in Costa Rica. We're getting downloads in France, Greece, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Papua New Guinea. So when you have that local focus, you can get global reach because people in other countries, they are looking to see where else in the world is having similar problems and how can we take the information from those countries or those regions and how can we apply it to us. So folks, this is my call to you to start adopting a local focus so you can build global reach. The majority of you are creating content that focuses on trying to get recognition from the U.S. And because you are doing that, your content is no longer unique and it also doesn't have the nuances that the content creators in each of those states are going to infuse in their content for them to stand out. Because somebody that's creating content specifically for California, that content is going to look very different from somebody creating it in Georgia or Alaska. The situations are all different in the States. All right? Start adopting that approach. Local focus, global reach, and I promise you, you're going to stand out. And every single time I get booked, whether I've gotten booked in Australia, when I've gotten booked in the US, when I've gotten booked, well, naturally back home in Canada, when I've gotten booked in other Caribbean islands, everybody booked me because they're like, your content is unique. We love your approach. We love your perspective. It's another perspective that's different than ours. We want that here. It's not the general consensus of where they are in their country. Yours is a different perspective. So that's my call to you guys, to start to have that local focus and global reach. And you know what? You know, my intros usually are never planned. I wing my intros and then I kind of get into the podcast episode, right? But guess what? That intro works perfectly to segue into our episode today. Our episode today is actually a featured episode where we have been able to connect with the one and only, the great Danielle Samlalsingh, a.k.a. Didi. Her friends call her Didi, and I consider myself her friend now, so I'm going to call her Didi. If you do not know who Didi Samlalsingh is, this is one of the most popular content creators over on TikTok right now, and she has been for the past going on 2 years now. Didi blew up over the pandemic where, quarantine happened. She's back in Trinidad. We're all looking for things to do, right? Her sister introduces her to the app, TikTok. She starts to check it out. When she got her start, she was doing all the trendy dances, having fun doing that stuff. And then she decided to try something different. She has a background in drama and in theater. She has a flair for the arts, right? And when she went back because she's based in New York right now, when she went back to the States, she's going to school over there for HR. When she went back to the States, she started to infuse her content, or she started to look to see, what's happening in the space. She was having conversations, and I won't give away too much because a part of that is in the interview. But she started to figure out her niche. She started to figure out, how to create content that's unique to her and her experiences and add her flair to it. And that took off. And I mean, this is exactly why, like I said, the intro works, because when you have local focus, you can build global reach. And Danielle has been able to do that. She creates a lot of comedy skits where she's infusing her Trini upbringing, and, she's breaking it down, making these skits. And everybody that is following it can laugh, whether it is, people who are in the Caribbean who can relate, because even if they're not Trini, they've had similar situations, growing up in their own Caribbean island, right? So they can relate to that. And then also people who don't know anything about Caribbean culture, right? They can look and they can just see how different Caribbean culture is, and it still works. It's still funny because they're going to have their own experiences, and they're going to be able to take that content that they see from Didi and relate it back to themselves, and also put themselves in a situation and see how would their parents have reacted in a similar situation, right? So she was able to infuse her local context of situations. She turned it into her skit. She made it unique, and Didi has blown up. Didi has over 250,000 followers over on TikTok with over 10 million accumulated likes. All right. It's amazing to see what she has done. And what I love is that these aren't vanity metrics. Dee Dee's engagement rate is ridiculously high as well. She has built a thriving online community surrounding her content, right? What you guys might not know is the average engagement rate over on TikTok currently right now is at 4%. So 4% of whatever your audience is, that's the average amount of, or that's the average percentage of the people that are going to engage on your content. So that's the average. Right now, 4% is the average engagement rate over on TikTok, right? Anything beyond 4% is you're doing well, right? Dee Dee's engagement rate over on TikTok is set at a very high 11%. So she gets a large percentage of her community engaging on her content. Remember, on social media aggregates all of the content, right? Because of the algorithms. They're going to show only a percentage of your audience the content, right? So when you are able to get a high engagement rate on these platforms, that's amazing, because that means people are actively looking for your content. They're actively subscribing. They're constantly checking your profiles out to see if you have new content, or they're turning on the notifications so that they never miss a piece of content coming out from you, right? And they're engaging on it, right? They are engaging on the content, and that's ultimately what you want. So the reason why I reached out to Dee Dee was Dee Dee right now is one of the most successful TikTokers coming out of the entire Caribbean, right? She's also working in HR at NBC Studios over in the States as well, right? So she's done really well for herself, and I wanted to reach out to Dee Dee and ask Dee Dee for some tips on creating content, because I know that when it comes to businesses creating content on social media, this is one of the areas that they struggle in. Right? So Dee Dee's going to come, or Dee Dee's, I asked Dee Dee to give us 5 tips on content creation. Dee Dee answered the call. She gave us her 5 tips. If you want, you guys can either, well, you're here, so you're going to listen to it, but you're also going to be able to, I'm going to put a link in the show notes where you guys can actually check out the written article that we did on the content creation tips, so you guys can read it as well. You can bookmark it and keep it. But we also got Dee Dee here to give us her 5 tips. So without further ado, let me hush my big mouth and let us bring in Dee Dee Samlalsingh to give us her 5 tips on creating content.
Hey Digipreneur family, it's Danielle Samlalsingh, aka Dee Dee or Dee, and these are my 5 tips for creating content. So tip number 1 is definitely find your niche. So what makes you unique? What makes you stand out from everybody else? Definitely make sure it's obviously something you're good at, whether it's a hobby or personality trait, because to some extent, this is going to become your persona. It's going to be what you're known for, what you become popular for, what people are going to search for you and hope to see, right? So definitely, number 1, make sure you're good at it and make sure you love it. And that's tip number 1. So that brings me to tip number 2. So once you find that one thing that really makes you stand out, hone in on it and really think hard about how you can make it different from everyone else that's doing the exact same thing. So using myself as an example, when I first joined TikTok, I was doing all the fun dances and trends that everybody else was doing. And very subconsciously, I think I wanted to utilize the app in a way that made me enjoy it more. And that made sense to me. And again, I was not thinking consciously of it at all. But I started kind of thinking of ways that I can be more unique on the app, and that I can be niche, and that I can stand out from all the other generic TikToks that were out there. And so when I thought of, okay, what makes me different? Definitely, number 1, my sense of humor. Number 2, I've always wanted to be an actress. I've always been in theater and drama, and so for me, those were my 2 strengths that I think I could have stood on. And very, again, subconsciously, it was very organic. I was talking to my cousins one morning, and we were just like talking about like funny comparisons between American school and Trinidad, school in Trinidad. And I thought to myself, I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. And I was granted the opportunity to go and study abroad, and I was able to experience and hear from my American friends like funny things that they thought that I said that they were so confused about, which was, again, something that I don't think a lot of people are exposed to. So for me, I was like, oh, that might be a really funny skit. Like, I should just play that out and see how it, and just post it just for fun. And not putting much thought into it, I posted it and I left it alone. And then I realized it kind of took off and it blew up. And at that point, I was like, wow, like, okay, what made this video blow up versus all the other videos that I've ever done? And that's when I realized my culture was infused in this video. And I was doing something out of the norm, something like completely different than anybody else was doing at the time. Like what made my skit so different is I was posing a cultural comparison that not many people get to experience, not many people get to see on their own. And so I think it made it that much more interesting and unique in a sense. And I think that's what really drew people to my content. And then I also paralleled it in a way that it was very comedic. And so obviously everybody loves to laugh. So I think that was why, or one of the main reasons that my videos do so well is because, again, you need to stand out from the crowd. You got to be a little different, and it's okay to be different too. Okay, so tip number 3, be entertaining. So you found your niche and what makes you unique, and now you have to create your content. So in the most general sense, you just want to be entertaining. But I think there are a few other things that you really need to look at before that point. And that's first, who's your audience? So who are you targeting? Who do you want to see your videos? For me, I know I would definitely be targeting Caribbean people or people of Caribbean descent. But let's say you're a nail tech. You may be targeting like young girls who want to figure out how to do their nails at home, right? So you really always have to make sure that your video is portrayed in a way that you are targeting your audience. Next, you want to really make sure that your content is sweet, short, and to the point. I think in this day and age, we all just have really short attention spans, which is sad, but I think a little true. And we just want to escape just for all of 30 seconds. So just making sure that your content is just nice and short, I think will do you all the good. And then back to the general sense, you just want to make sure that your content is engaging, and you want to make sure that your viewers don't want to scroll past your video. They want to watch it through, and it's holding their attention the entire time. So definitely be entertaining. So tip number 4 is equipment. So there are a lot of content creators that utilize cameras and special editing software and lighting, and I promise you, none of it is necessary. All you need is the basics. You just need a cell phone with a good quality camera, and majority of the times I use natural lighting. And there's the one-off chance that I might use my ring light. But a lot of people put off creating content because they think they need all this expensive equipment. And I promise you, all you need is the sun, your cell phone, and yourself, and you're good to go. Number 5, just be yourself. And that might sound extremely cliche, but I promise you, once your audience gets to know you and see your heart and are able to connect with you both online and offline. I've met the most amazing people in person that come up to me and say, your content just resonated with me in such a way that I can't describe. It's just the best feeling in the world. So don't be afraid to be yourself and share who you are, share your struggles, share your triumphs. And I promise you, you will touch more people than you actually realize. For me personally, I have spoken about my mental health battles, and I've spoken about my recent diagnosis with arthritis. And so I think that by me sharing that my life isn't perfect, I think that more people get to see that I'm actually a human being. And there's so many people that actually reach out to me in my DMs and share with me that they're going through the same thing, and we get to connect and we get to talk. And I think that's really the core of what makes your page you, is just to be yourself and share yourself with everyone else once you choose to do that.
Folks, That was Danielle Samlalsingh, a.k.a. Didi. Her friends call her Didi. Go and check out Danielle's TikTok page, all right? You can go check her out over on TikTok. Just type in Didi Samlalsingh, Samlalsingh. I'm going to link to her TikTok page in the show notes as well. Or you guys can go and follow her over on Instagram as well. Same thing, Danielle Samlalsingh. I will link to her Instagram page over as well. All right. That is 5 tips over from one of the top TikTok creators out of the Caribbean right now. For me, one of the key tips was on the equipment. Start where you guys are currently at. You do not need all of the fancy tools, all the fancy equipment. You really don't. Because you know what? When I got started, I started off as a blogger, right? I'm blogging, I'm just writing, right? I'm just writing. I wasn't even doing video content and I wasn't podcasting when I got started. I blew up off of blogs, and blogs are still a big thing right now. However, when I am doing video content, as much as I've done work with videographers and photographers, and I've hired them to do certain things, to be honest, now the best content I do is all from my cell phone, right? It's all from my cell phone and just finding creative ways to execute on my objectives over on TikTok. And it's not just TikTok. It's really just about, the mindset of TikTok, creating short form vertical video, because you could do that over on TikTok. You could then, remove the watermark. You could bring the videos over on Instagram if you're not over on TikTok, but you guys can do the videos on Instagram, and then you guys can repurpose them on YouTube Shorts. So I focus a lot when it comes to video content now on just using my smartphone, right? The most I've done is I went and I bought a $20 USB Type-C microphone to give me better audio, right? But that was $20. And even if you don't want to spend that money, you could even use your headphone set if you need to get a little bit of better quality or whatnot. But the point is, start where you are. Start with what you have. As Danielle said, your phone, natural light. The off time, she might bring out her ring light. And I just want you guys to really, really dive in on that point, because many of you are not starting because you think you need all of the fancy equipment, and you don't. Some of the best content right now, because of the TikTok boom, is just regular schmegular cell phone video. Right? Use your cell phone, produce the content, get it out there, and you guys will be able to start to grow. You just need to figure out, as Danielle said in point number 1, figure out your niche, figure out your thing, and then make it your own, right? So she got started creating content, and then once she started to, she was doing all the trendy dances, she figured out how to inject her personality, how to inject her upbringing, how to have her own unique perspective in the content, and that is what we love her for, all right? So local focus on your content is going to allow you to build global reach. Start where you are. Start with what you have, all right? So I hope you guys enjoyed the 5 tips with Danielle, a.k.a. Didi. Remember, don't forget to go hit the show notes. Go check her out if you are not already following her. All right. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please drop a rating. If you're listening over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, drop a rating. The ratings help grow the Digipreneur FM podcast around the world. People see the ratings, are like, oh, I got to check this thing out, right? So if you enjoy the podcast, definitely do me a favor and drop a rating. And if you really, really enjoyed the podcast, please drop a review. The reviews help me keep a pulse on how we are doing with the podcast. And again, also gives the prospecting Digipreneur FM listeners something to work with. They'll read the reviews, they'll see, what it's about and see if it is worth their time. So definitely help me out, help your boy out, drop a review if you really enjoyed the content, all right? If you want to learn more about building your digital presence and monetizing your platforms, definitely check out the Keron Rose, KeronRose.com. Check out the KeronRose.com website. You guys can also check out the digipreneur.fm website to stay up to date on all things happening with the podcast. The links to both of those platforms are going to be in the show notes, all right? And also, I would love your feedback. Are you guys enjoying the features? You know, because one of the things that, you know, why I haven't done live interviews this year is just timing. My timing, you guys know I'm involved in a lot of things now. So correlating with other, you know, top experts and top influencers and their timing with my timing, it's been hectic, and I just haven't really, you know, been in that mindset to do all of that, right? However, let me know if you guys are enjoying these features, because now what's happening is I'm able to get access to people and have them, rather than doing a whole live episode, I pitched them the topic, they can send over their content, and then we plug it in, and it works out kind of like this. So we did the same thing with Crew Cuts about 2 or 3 weeks ago, a couple weeks ago, right, where he sent over his content, and that episode is doing really well. And then we did one with Danielle. So again, reach out, let me know if you guys are enjoying this kind of like a power episode from some of these key business owners and influencers who are thriving, doing their thing. Let me know if you guys are enjoying it, all right? Anyways, I've talked enough. That is it from me today, folks. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week and have fun over the weekend. Take care.
You've been listening to the Digiboss, Keron Rose. We hope your notepad was filled after this episode. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. The learning doesn't stop, folks. And to make sure you don't miss any gems from the Digiboss, go over and follow him on all social media platforms at Keron Rose. Folks, don't just sit there with a notepad. We need you to implement at least one thing into your business before the next episode. That's the only way your business levels up. Thanks for listening to Digipreneur FM. Now go be great.